How about mine? There we go. We can hear that one.
Okay, there we go. All right. Thank you. You look familiar. You've been to a few of these. All right.
I haven't heard. I wondered the same thought with everything that's been going on out there. He's on my visit list after the race season's over.
I think he's enjoying his C8, just driving around Michigan. But yeah. All right. Well, we're here with Mobil 1, the oil guys here. So we appreciate you guys coming out and wanting to discuss the exciting topic of oil, which we have Cliff, our resident expert here. My name's Colin Moore. I manage our U.S. business partnership with General Motors here. So get involved with the race team, but my day-to-day job is all the business that we do through the dealerships and some of the factory fill plants. So, but I definitely enjoy getting out and engaging with you guys, and I've done a few of the tech talks at the Corvette corrals. If you guys have been to any of the IMSA races, so I encourage you to catch one of those if you have a chance. They're always exciting. So who can tell me how many years has Mobil been the factory fill in the Corvettes? All right, 32. You can give him a hat.
Yep.
All right. He probably has several. All right. And how many years has Mobil 1 been partnered with Corvette Racing? Close. 26. So we actually started with them a year before they started the team in development. And then so we've been with Corvette Racing since their inception 25 years ago. So yeah, long partnerships here between ExxonMobil and General Motors. So, but that's enough about the history here. I know you guys are here to talk about technical oil questions with Cliff here. So just a couple of reminders. I think you guys all know the program, but if you ask a question, you get a hat. So we have a lovely assistant passing out the hats. And then at the end, we'll do a drawing for a couple of Mobil 1 Corvette Racing jackets. So like the ones you see in the gift shops. That's the only place you can get them. And then we'll also do a drawing for some hot laps, I believe, over at the Motorsports Park. So stick around. So if you didn't get a ticket, make sure and see her, and she'll give you a ticket for the drawing. So I think that is all I had, and I'll turn it over to Cliff.
Thanks, Colin. We were told to make sure we had some good giveaways because the guys that were here ahead of time that just built the engine in front. Quick show of hands, who was here for that? You guys all got a chance to see it? Yeah. They said, man, you got a big act to follow. And the only thing I wanted to comment was you saw how quickly they got that out of here after the tech talk. You make one joke about putting the engine in your rental car, and it's just gone. So yeah, hopefully we've got a good act to follow. We do have a lot of giveaways. The hot laps are absolutely worth it if you haven't been over to the track. I had a great experience. I've driven a C8 Z51 and a C8 Z06 over there, as well as at Spring Mountain. And those of you that know Tony Esposito, our GM, national or global account manager, that was actually his first experience with C8s, and driving it on the track with an instructor and going through the whole program over there was what led to him buying his C8 that he now has in Houston, Texas. So great program. Hopefully the hot laps are something that you guys enjoy. As Colin mentioned, my name is Cliff Salvesen. I am our technical advisor for North American Motorsports, which means I embed with all the teams that we sponsor, work with them to develop race oils, work with our in-house R&D guys, and hopefully take some of the technology from those race oils, and they eventually make it into the street car oils like we'd use in our cars here. We did a couple of cool events. This was Sebring this year for the 12 hours of Sebring. We did a red, white, and blue color scheme for the Pratt & Miller cars. It was something that they don't normally do, but I think the cars looked spectacular. And the intro video that we had playing before we got up here to talk was also kind of the quick summary highlight reel from that Sebring race. I'll grab the clicker here and advance the slides. Maybe? There we go. I think that, we'll go back one. We've got a couple of videos here for you for the first time that hopefully those come through clearly, and we'll get a chance to watch those. I think this is the high-speed test video. I don't remember if we kept that one in there or not.
Mobil developed the world's first full synthetic motor oil. They named it Mobil 1. Mobil 1 engineers perfected the formula, making it work even more efficiently at significantly higher temperatures. The Mobil 1 team were ready for what came next. At the same time, General Motors and ExxonMobil were also working together to solve engine knock challenges and co-develop the first automatic transmission fluid technology. In 1986, Mobil 1 became available to customers in General Motors dealerships through the GM Goodwrench Oil program, a key element of what is now known as certified service, bringing together all of the General Motors brands. And in 1993, every Chevrolet Corvette rolling off the production line was factory filled with Mobil 1 motor oil. Since then, over 850,000 engines have been filled with Mobil 1 from day one. In 1997, Mobil 1 engineers introduced Super Syn technology, a new patented formula maximizing performance at race temperatures, leading the way to what came next. And now, legendary motorsports partnership was established with the launch of the Corvette Racing Factory Program, a relationship that's enabled the development of new formulations, including the first track-to-street oil for high-performance General Motors engines. And now together, we have launched Mobil 1 Supercar.
Can we turn the volume up just a hair on the video?
The Dexos R approval. Our motorsports partnership has remained strong for 25 years, resulting in the ultimate prize, a 9th victory at Le Mans in 2023. And as we move into a new era, Mobil 1 is proud to continue its collaboration with the Corvette Racing customer teams. And we are ready for what's next, the Corvette Z06 GT3R. But it doesn't end there. Our Mobil 1 performance partnerships with General Motors have now expanded beyond Corvette. Mobil 1 is the official motor oil of both Chevrolet Performance and Cadillac Sports Car Racing, who swept the championships in the 2023 IMSA Grand Touring prototype season. Mobil 1 and General Motors are working closely together to develop and execute marketing initiatives that benefit from powerful synergies, elevating our brands together. Mobil 1 scientists and engineers are ready for the mobility transition, working with advanced electric vehicle fluids, helping EVs to go further, longer, and safer. And when it comes to General Motors' sustainability ambitions, ExxonMobil is ready to support them every step of the way. So, whatever the future holds, ExxonMobil and General Motors will be ready for what's next.
Great. Thank you very much. Yeah, so a couple of call-outs from that video. That's more about the overall GM partnership, but it's cool for me to look back and see a few of those things with the yellow and gray Pratt Miller cars at Sebring. One of those photo shoots I was there for. I don't know, is Richard Prince in the back somewhere, or is he still out talking with people? Okay. That was actually kind of funny because you see those shots and they look amazing. I helped do a little bit of the video production side, not necessarily for that shot, but for some of our other ones. And you think, oh, that must be a closed track circuit and that must be very, very special. I think that was Tuesday or Wednesday in Sebring, and we were using a rental car. We had him like basically Velcroed into the trunk area of an SUV, laying out there with his camera, taking the action shots. And it came out looking that great, but it's kind of funny to look back on those and go, ah, yeah, I remember that. That was like 3 of us in a $20 effort, and it made it into the big production video, which is cool. There were a number of other things that I want to point to or call out from that video, but we'll wait till we get to the relevant slide, and we'll talk about those a little bit more. So my job on the technical side is working with all of our partners in IMSA, in NASCAR, and in NHRA, and supplying them bespoke lubricants. Eventually, those do come all the way through, and they make it into the production oils that you guys have factory fill in your cars. Before we jump into the technical piece, I always like to just point out a couple of things on the bottles that are relevant for everybody if you do have questions. We try to put all of our industry approvals either here or on the back. This being Supercar, it's basically just the GM approvals, but you'd also see ASEA, API, ASTM, all of those third-party ratings agencies that basically sign off on the approvals for the oils. ASTM, API, obviously American Petroleum Institute, SAE, Society of Automotive Engineers, Dexos for General Motors. So that's letting you know if you've got the seal or if you got the mark on the bottle, you actually ran their tests, you passed their tests, and everything is approved by that OEM. If you see language that says found suitable for or It's kind of a cop-out where it says, we put this oil together and we think it would work, but we didn't actually run the test. That's the big difference that I want to point out. If you have the seal on here, it means you did all the work and you signed everything off. Some of the much smaller blenders, some of the third-party, we would call boutique blenders, the smaller oil companies, will have that found suitable language. And that basically means it's still a high-quality product, but just sometimes for cost, development, or time reasons, they didn't actually run the test. The marketing claims, talking about what the oil does, advanced synthetic oil, high-performance vehicles for supercar. You've got your viscosity on here. We'll come back to that in a minute. But then we also try to put a lot of customer support language on here. It's very, very tiny, but we have a contact phone number, we've got a contact email, we've got a scanner for a website that if you do have any questions about, is this oil suitable for my car? Or in Colin's case, he's rebuilding an old Chevy truck, but he's trying to do kind of a resto mod. You know, maybe originally it took 10W30. If you're putting a newer engine in there, if you're changing the bearing clearances, we actually have a staffed help desk in North America that will take all of those questions, and either if they can answer them themselves, they will. If they can't answer them themselves, they'll reach out to myself or one or two of my colleagues, and we'll come up with an answer for you and send it back. So there's actually a lot of information on the bottle. And then the one other cool thing, I'm pointing it out just because I think we still have the patent for it. You can see how the fill spout is offset to one side. Whenever I see it in the video, I always see people tilting the bottle this way with the fill side on the low end. If you pour it the other way and you basically have this on the low side, you can get the bottle almost horizontal before the oil starts to spill out of the cap. That was actually an ergonomic change that was done late 80s, early 90s. We did a bunch of research, and it was a way to make it easier to pour without spilling when you're trying to do the fill cap out in the field. So just minor thing on bottle design and what goes into the bottle of Mobil 1. Again, blowing up the customer help desk support since you couldn't read it when it was in that size 10 font on this massive screen. But we have an oil selector, we've got emails, we've got phone numbers, we've got everything that if you do have any questions that either I didn't answer today or they come to you after the fact, those are help desk resources for you to use. We have product data sheets, PDSs, that will tell you everything about the recipe and what's in there, as well as zinc and phosphorus levels. I'm sure some of the questions we'll have today are about ZDDP, especially when it comes to older cars, and we'll talk about those. But all of this information is available on our website. If you were to Google Mobil 1 0W40 Supercar and click on the relevant mobil.com search page, this is what it's going to take you to, and we have all of those questions out there for you to get more info. We talked about claims. I'm going to skip through that one. But the industry approvals, you know, we mentioned those, SAE, Society of Automotive Engineers, API, ILSAC, International Lubricant Specification, Dexos for General Motors, Motorcraft for Ford, Chrysler's got their own, Honda's got their own, trying to get one oil to meet all of these standards. It used to be Society of Automotive Engineers said, here's what a 30-weight oil should look like. If you make this and you get the approval, you're good to go. Then SAE expanded, now you have API, you have 2 rating agencies, it's still not that bad. Now you've got probably 20 or 30 if you want to do a general mass market oil. And it can be a little bit difficult to meet everybody's diverging standards. You know, if you're Toyota and you're designing a hybrid oil for a Prius, that's going to look very, very different than an oil for a Z06 that's spending 90% of its time on a racetrack. So we've got all of these different approvals, all these different weight categories, and all of that goes into the oil development and design. So breaking down the viscosity, a lot of the folks think that the W in a 0W40 means zero weight. So they'll have concerns, you know, why would I put a zero weight oil in my performance car? The W actually means winter. So in the old days, you'd have in the owner's manual for a tractor, a pickup truck, even some of the Corvettes, if you go back to C1 and C2, they'll say, please run an SAE 30 grade in the summertime. Please switch to an SAE 10 grade in the wintertime. When multi-grade oils came around, you got VMs, viscosity modifiers. They let you have an oil that does both jobs. It will act like a zero weight in the wintertime or in the cold weather temperatures, and then it acts like a 40 weight in the higher temperatures. So you're getting the best of both worlds. You're basically expanding that viscosity curve and where everything applies across a broader and broader temperature range. So the W for here means winter, and we basically do 2 ratings. SAE grades can be a little bit broad. We'll use kinematic viscosity at 40 degrees. We'll use kinematic viscosity at 100 degrees Celsius to establish our curves and put all of this together. I know it's a lot of technical data. I'm sorry if we're over anybody's head, but looking at the broad viscosity trends, when this was put together in 22, you can see that the weights are starting to come down and the take rates for the very thick grades are dropping a little bit. The increase is mostly the 020s, 016s are just starting to come up, and those would be things that you would put into a hybrid or into a car that's not necessarily seeing the highest stress for the fuel economy benefit. Alrighty, we've got one more video here, I think, and then a little bit more technical info. We'll get to the questions.
The dyno test for the LT6, it's unique for the, call it more mainstream high volume OEMs. Big exotics, they do it. The big three, the high volume, the typical American pony cars, it's not done. It is a great quality gate. So instead of just idling the engine on a dyno, this is a full load, high speed dyno test. It does start that break-in process. We get that kick started a little bit in a controlled setting where we can control the temperatures, the speed profile, and things like that.
It's a gentle send-off to start the break-in process and allows us to check the oil, check everything, and everything's good to go so the customer has a great experience in the Z06.
What type of oil is used in the Z06 and what makes it so unique?
We developed an all-new oil for the LT6 engine. It's a 5W50, and it's a Dexos R. R stands for racing. We're really proud of this oil. We work very closely with ExxonMobil.
The oil type is a big enabler for what this engine does, right? I mean, we're breaking records for naturally aspirated horsepower with this engine. If you think about everything else in the LT6, the engineering has to be precise to the micron to make these parts work. The oil life monitoring system is the same way. It's actively looking at the way the engine's being used and what it's doing and factor that into the life or longevity of the oil and just follow the dash and it'll tell you when it's time.
So circling back to our earlier video here, I like to talk about oil developments and what we do for basically getting something to be all the way into a factory fill oil that you would see right across the street in Bowling Green in their performance build center. For us, it starts with simulation. A lot of folks have questions about AI. I like to joke that we were doing large models before they were called AI in terms of server space or in terms of virtual design. We have digitized our test results back to the late 80s or early 90s. So if we did candidate oils that didn't work for whatever reason, you know, maybe they're really, really good at keeping the engine clean, but they failed on oxidation or fuel economy or something else. We've got all of those results, and when we put those together, we can say, okay, if we take this base oil and we take this detergent and this friction modifier and this viscosity modifier and we put them all together, it's the first time we've seen that particular combination. Based on all those historical test results, what do we think this oil is going to test out as? What is it going to look like? How is it going to perform? And we like doing that because you can run thousands of simulations for basically just the cost of computer time. It's less expensive for us to run all those early simulations. And that'll tell you, okay, we think this is going to be good for corrosion. It may be okay for fuel economy or vice versa. And we'll develop a few candidates from that. Then we move into lab tests, which is the folks with the beakers. We had that one dramatic shot from the second video. You saw the robot arms, and you saw a whole bunch of tiny vials. It almost looked like Jurassic Park. That is an actual machine. We moved it into a different spot for the video. But that actually can run samples very, very quickly, and you can actually run through probably 100 oxidation tests in a day, where it's reaching over, it's picking them up, it's testing each individual vial, and it can do all of that throughput automatically. So those lab tests are a couple $100 a piece. We run a lot of those, and that's basically anchoring the simulation model. Okay, we thought it was going to do X. How close did we get to that target? Was it better? Was it worse? And make sure the simulations are working, make sure the lab tests look good. And that's where we're slowly starting to scale up. You would go from hundreds of candidates down to maybe 10 to 20 by the time you get to the engine tests. That's where I started my career, was our engine test lab. And that's where you'll take these tests, you'll put them into a 3.6 liter out of a Cadillac ATS, or into the General Motors oxidation test, which uses the V8 out of the Corvette, and you'll run that for prescribed conditions, temperatures, everything to the end of the test. You'll tear that apart, take pictures of the cams, take pictures of the pistons, take pictures of everything else, consult with the GM engineers and say, this looks good, or no, we got more work to do. And those tests start at $50,000 or $60,000. They go up into the six-figure and seven-figure range when you're doing a development. So when we were talking about what's on the bottle and why doesn't everybody run the tests, it's millions of dollars to bring an oil to market if you want it to be factory fill and meet the OEM's guidelines. So the engine tests, by that point, you're hopefully down to maybe 10 different oils that you're testing and evaluating and running all of these full engine dyno tests. And then we get to the bottom, which is where I work now, called proof of performance. And not everybody's required to do this. Some people just stop once they've got their approvals from the OEM. You can put the label on the bottle, you know you're good, you're ready to go. For us now, proof of performance is racing, where I am, making sure that these oils will stand up to track use. It's also what we would call mileage accumulation dynamometers, or mileage accumulation simulations as well, where we'll actually buy vehicles from a dealer, we'll instrument them, and we'll run them on dynamometers for anywhere from a low of one oil change, 10, 20,000 miles, up to a max of 1 million miles or more. So those programs are running constantly, and that's a way to just verify over the vehicle's entire life, is it going to do what we thought it was going to do, and is it going to hold up and anchor the rest of this? So that's a little bit about what the oil development side looks like. Skip over, that's one of the examples for the tests. But at the end of it, again, as mentioned, we'll be using IR cameras. You're seeing the exhaust glowing on a couple of the engines. That would be, especially for the new turbocharged engines, when the exhaust gets glowing like that, it can basically burn the oil or it can coke the oil. When that shuts down, you want to make sure that those turbo bearings are going to come through okay. We've got photo booths, we've got measurement instruments. This is actually a cylinder liner, so we're doing a scraping of the cylinder wall to make sure that it hasn't worn away too much of the cylinder liner, and the friction coefficients of that are still what we would expect them to be. And all of that goes into the final report for the manufacturers, as well as this, which would be a used oil report. We're not going to go through this line by line. I don't want to put anybody to sleep. But when we get a used oil sample from a race car, from a test car on the dyno, from the engine dyno shop when we're tearing these things apart, we're looking for how much water does it have in it? How much fuel does it have in it? Did the oil break from a viscometric standpoint? Does it have iron, copper from the bearings? Does it have titanium from the valve springs? How does everything look? And is this holding up to what we expect it to do? Quick questions for hats. If anybody wants to earn a hat and jump ahead of the queue here. Can anyone tell me what the 3 metals typically used in a modern tri-metal bearing would be? Anybody know? You got to raise your hand if you wouldn't mind. Yes, sir. Okay. How about the other 2? I heard copper. Excellent. Magnesium, not typically for a bearing. The 3 that you would mainly have is either tin or aluminum in the top layer, which is here, copper in the second layer, and then you'll have iron to give the bearing strength and to shape it. So typically you're not going to be wearing away the iron layer. If you get all the way through to the iron, you've got bigger problems. But when people are looking at their used oil analysis reports, if you go to Blackstone or if you go to somebody else, you'll have your aluminum up here. You can see that's at about 9 parts per million. You can see the iron is at about 13. And that's not from the bearings, that's from your cylinder walls, that's from everything else, and your copper is at 21. That looks pretty good to us. Parts per million is such a small concentration that you're basically looking to see those numbers where they start, and are they increasing over time, and how quickly are they increasing, and that gives you a sign of equipment health. Yes, sir? It can be. You would typically want to make sure you don't just get one sample. Yeah, over time, it can be very useful if you want to track it. If you're trying to, usually what we use this for is to extend oil changes. If we've got an equipment manufacturer that says, hey, we're running up to 10,000 miles, can we go to 20? And these would be big trucks, or these would be fleet customers. But we would use this to either say, yes, everything looks good, you can extend that, or no, you're at about the limit, you want to keep your oil change interval where you are. We can also use it to diagnose equipment failures. Yes, so in this case, you might be wondering, if you've got a tri-metal bearing, how come the aluminum number is lower than the copper or the iron number? That's because the bearings aren't the only source of metal in your engine. We actually had a race customer that the copper spiked. It went to 300, 400, 500 parts per million, and they said, ooh, we got a bearing problem. And the aluminum was still rock solid. It was low, there was nothing in there. So we said, well, probably not, because to get to the copper, you'd have to go through the aluminum. We would have seen that chewed up. Did you have any race damage the day before in practice? And they said, yeah, there was debris on the track. It came right through the oil cooler. We had to take that system apart and replace everything. And we said, oh, that's probably your issue. The heat exchanger that you use for the oil cooler has a copper core. And when you put a brand new oil cooler on there, it hasn't passivated yet. So you're going to generate just a little bit of copper. It doesn't hurt anything. It's not hurting the engine, but that's going to make its way through. And then on the first oil change, you'll flush some of that out. So to your point about starting from the second oil change, any molybdenum, any silicone from RTV, from the engine assembly process, that first oil change is usually a way to get all of that out, let everything settle down a little bit, and then the numbers will start to track a little bit better over time. Yes, sir? A little bit, yes. Did you have a question on that one specifically? Yep. My understanding is it was cleanliness and assembly on the crankshafts and bearings, that the supplier that was bringing it in has a spec they have to meet for final finish on the metal, and then cleanliness as far as cleaning that after it's been machined. And I think they had a bad batch of crankshafts or bad batch of bearings that basically made it into production. Don't quote me on that. You'll have to ask the engineers when they come in from General Motors, but my understanding is that was one of the contributors to the recall. Sure. So we'll go back here. The question was, if you have a car that's not hitting its mileage limits, how often should you change it? Typically, in that case, you're not going to get much oxidation. Oxidation is you're breaking down from high temperatures, you're racing it, or you're pulling a trailer up a hill and the exhaust is glowing. But you'll get a water number, and you'll typically get fuel dilution, and those are usually the big ones for a car that sits all the time. Is if you don't get it up to full operating temperature, you'll get some exhaust gas byproducts that make their way down into it. You'll get some fuel dilution, just natural part of running an engine. And when it then sits and it heats up and cools down in your garage, you're going to get condensation. You're going to get a little bit of water in the oil. When the water meets all those contaminants, they get together and they form acids. And those can start to go after your bearings, go after your gaskets, and start to eat away at it. So we say change it once a year, even if you're not driving it enough to hit the mileage limits on your DIC. And that's to basically flush all those contaminants out, any fuel that got in there, any exhaust gas. And now, if the water tries to react with something, there's nothing in it. You got fresh, clean oil in it, and the water is just going to boil out the next time you drive the car. Above 212 degrees to boil the water out. Yep. So typically for oil temperatures, what we'd see is on a dyno, even for a 20-minute trip, your coolant temperature may make its way all the way up. If the engine's being run at very low RPM, the oil temperature may only get up to 170, 180 degrees while you're running it. So you'll be able to boil out the water. You'll also evaporate most of the fuel. Fuel has a range of chain molecules in it that you may not get the long chain molecules out unless you get it super hot. But running it up to full operating temperature, letting everything line out, will get the water and the fuel out typically. So I'm going to keep rolling a little bit unless we have oil change questions, but I know we got 1, 2, 3. Let me just get to the next slide real quick. Valve springs. We already covered that on the titanium side. That was going to be a hat question. Can anybody tell me the 3 types of lubrication that are represented here? I'll give you a hint. When you're on this side here, everything is separated and nice and happy. You've got your bearing materials, and they are basically floating on a nice pool of oil. And then you start to press that out of the way, and you start getting occasional metal-to-metal contact, and then you go a little bit too far, and now you've pressed almost all the oil out, and the metal is scraping against itself and causing more wear. I was looking for the actual names. Hydrodynamic is definitely one of them. I like the startup and transition point. That's exactly what's happening. Hydrodynamic is when everything is happy and separated. And then, I think I put the names on here. Yep. So hydrodynamic is the one all the way on the right there. Mixed is when you'll get that occasional metal-to-metal contact. And then boundary is when you basically pushed it all out of the way and you've got metal scraping on itself. This is one of the reasons that we use anti-wear additives, that basically when you do get to the metal, you're going to scrape off a layer of anti-wear instead of a layer of your engine. And then on the mixed side, that's usually to the point where that would be a viscosity change if you're running the wrong oil, if you're running it too hot, if you're basically getting into issues there where you're not going to see huge engine wear, but on those oil analysis reports, the aluminum, the copper, the iron will start to tick up over time, and you may do a recommendation to say, hey, you want to go thicker, or you want to run a different oil with a different additive package to basically keep your engine safe. So you're going to get a lot of hats. Maybe only get one, but you're asking a lot of good questions. So we had 3 questions here. I'll go through. Yes, sir. We'll go 1, 2, 3. Yep. Good question. Our recommendation from an overall oil and engine health would be to put fresh, clean oil, do your oil change in the fall, right before you put it away. You've got clean oil in it while it's sitting over the winter time. Everything's good now. It's like putting stable in your gas, basically. And then when you fire it up in the springtime, take it out, you're good to go for the season. Question a couple rows back. Yes, sir.
What's the shelf life of Mobil 1?
If you have bottles sitting up on the garage and they haven't been opened yet, we would say 5 years. Once you've pierced the foil seal and you put part of the quart in or bigger bottle, whatever you're using, try to use it up within 1 year. If you go past that 1 year mark, I personally run the post 1 year expired shelf life stuff in my lawnmower and in my home generator. In the back.
Yes, sir. Thank you for your presentation. It's most informative. Getting back to this gentleman up here, I may have missed that. Was that the recall on the, I have a 23 Denali. It's got the 6.2 in it. It has a major recall. The dealer tells me they're going to change the oil, change the filter. They had the wrong viscosity of the oil in the engine. They didn't mention anything about contamination. Can you, I know this doesn't affect the Corvette, but it is in your purview. They're saying they change the oil, and I think I'm not sure if they're going to bore scope or not, what they're going to do. But if it's bad, they're going to change the engine. Would that much viscosity have that large of an effect on an engine?
Good question. So I'm going to do the caveat and say I'm kind of talking to you as an automotive engineer, not specifically on behalf of General Motors or Mobil 1. Because some of what I've heard is just communication through emails. I don't have the technical service bulletin, the TSB, or the recall right in front of me to talk about how they're doing it. My understanding is they're looking for any damage to the engines when you bring it in. They're doing a picoscope and they're listening for any knocking or any damage for what you have. They're looking at the crank position and cam position sensor to see if there's anything out of phase. And if the engine looks good health-wise, they're recommending that oil change from 0.20 to 0.40. If they have issues found on either a visual inspection or with the picoscope or anything else at the dealer, then they're doing the engine replacement. I would have no concerns on an L87 6.2 liter changing it to 0.40 supercar just like the Corvette and moving away from the 0.20.
That was my next question.
I think that General Motors does a great job on durability testing to make sure the 0.20 is going to last the life of the car when you don't have these one-off issues. You know, again, I think the recall was caused by a batch of crankshafts that didn't meet spec, and because they don't know which engines have those crankshafts, they're doing the recall for all of the vehicles to do these inspections. So General Motors does the durability study on the 0.20, and they know that that should be good for the life of the car when everything is within design spec. When you go from 0.20 to a 0.40, you're going to sacrifice a little bit of fuel economy, and we're talking 2 or 3 tenths of a mile per gallon. But you're going to have a little bit better protection on the heavier range. And if I had a Suburban or a Denali or a truck with the 6.2, most of my trucks and SUVs spend their time towing trailers, pulling lumber, being used as work vehicles. And so I would sacrifice the fuel economy to take the protection, if that makes sense.
So you're at 20. Okay. Thank you very much, sir.
You're welcome.
Yeah, and I've got that same engine, and I've got about 10,000 miles on it using the 0.40, and purrs like a kitten, so I've not had any issues.
I think we've got a slide. I'm going to skip ahead a little bit here. Product data sheet, if you click on that one. I had one that had that called out specifically. Yes, this one. So when you do look at ratings, an SAE grade, a 5W30, a 0W40, or whatever, is a range. It's not a data point. When we are designing internally and looking at viscometrics, we use kinematic viscosity because kinematic viscosity is a point, not a range. So if you have a 0.40, you're going to be right here on this range, and you can see that that falls between, I think it's 12.4 centistokes and 16.2 centistokes. So if you're somewhere in that range for viscosity, you are considered a 40 weight oil, whether it's 5W40 or 0W40. And I put some of our competitors up here, you know, Mobil 1 Supercar, Mobil 1 European car formula, we've got Shell, we've got Redline, and they're, as you'd expect, all over the range. Where you get into this is if you have somebody who's right here on the very bottom, as thin as you can get and still be a 40 weight oil, and you have somebody else that's right here at the very top of the 30 weight range, you're actually closer to each other than you would be if you had one at the very bottom and one at the very top of the 40 weight range. You know, the 40 weight that's up here is actually almost a 50 weight, if that makes sense. So an SAE weight grade is a range versus kinematic viscosity at 100 Celsius is a point. 12.5 is 12.5 is 12.5. You can compare us to anybody else, get that KV100 number, and that's going to help you match it up. Because these are ranges, that's why they have to protect for a 20 weight that's down here at the bottom, a 20 weight that's down here at the top. You're actually not that far off from the 40s. So that's why I would not be worried going from the 020 to the 040. You've got a little bit of wiggle room in all of these. Now, if you had a hybrid that was designed with bearing clearances for a 16 weight, or now I think the thinnest that we make is a 0W8 for the Toyota 3rd gen or 4th gen Prius. And if you were to put 60 weight oil in that Prius, I'd say, yeah, you've probably done too much of a jump on viscometrics. That engine's going to lose a lot of horsepower trying to pump that very thick oil, or vice versa. If you put a 0W8 in your Z06 and you're tracking it, now you've gone too thin, you're probably going to have some metallurgy issues. But within that kind of narrow band, you've got a little bit of wiggle room, and that's actually part of the reason why the factory fill Corvettes for C4, C5, C6 were 5W30, and now we've been able to recommend 040 supercar in its place, because a 5W30 temperature ranges like this. Remember, the 5W is your winter, your cold number, and your 30's here. A 040 covers that same viscosity range, just a little bit broader on both sides. So being a 0W, it's going to get up to the valve train a little bit quicker when you first fire it up and when it's cold. It's going to be a little bit thicker on the high side if you're going to be tracking it, if you're going to be driving it real hard in August in Death Valley or whatever. You're going to have a little bit better protection on the temperature side. So, yeah, we'll go right here. One. Oh, yeah, Colin's handing out the microphone, so we'll go based on who's holding the mic.
What were they putting in the C7?
Factory fill for C7s.
C7, I believe, was 530 through most of its production run. I think the 040 supercar started with the first year of C8. And both of those are still completely recommended, interchangeable. If you've been running 530 and you're happy with it and it's working for you, no problem to stay on it. We have just been doing the testing with General Motors to basically backdate the 040 approvals to go all the way back to Gen 2 small blocks now. So LT1, LT4, LT5 for 4th gen Corvettes, as well as the LT4s and LT6s for the C8s. The acronyms are used for both generations. But everything back to 93 is approved now for 040 supercar if you want to use it. Colin, I'm going to let you just hand the mic to people rather than point for questions. Whoever's got the mic can ask their question. Great.
Hi. I just want to know if there's any difference if I'm using the correct oil, if I buy it from Costco when it's on sale, or if I get it from my dealership.
I'm sorry, could you hold the mic up a little bit closer? I only caught about half of that.
Is there a difference in the oil, if I'm using the correct oil, if I buy it myself at Costco on sale, or I get it from my dealer?
Great question.
Or
Yes.
Walmart,
So there's internet rumors, for instance, that like the Mobil one at Walmart is lower quality or a different formulation for Walmart, and that's why it's cheaper. I know you said Costco, but just using that in between. And the answer to that is no. It's all the same. If you're buying Mobil 1 15W50, which was the recommended track oil for a long time, for instance, at Walmart, it is the same 1550 as at Jags, as at anywhere else. One of our distributors actually came to one of our sales guys and said, hey, I can buy it at Walmart cheaper than I can buy it from you. Why? And our sales guy very wisely said, Walmart buys 1 billion gallons, you buy 2,000 gallons. If you're willing to buy 1 billion gallons, I will happily set you up as a customer, and I will sell it to you at the exact same price as Walmart. But that's typically where you might see some price variations between what I would call the bulk retailers versus, say, the dealerships or the smaller boutique realtors that maybe don't buy as much product. But all the same formulations, no concerns there. If you're buying supercar, if you're buying 1550, if you're buying European car, whatever your vehicle takes, that should be the same formulation.
Yeah, I have a C5 Corvette, and like all newer Corvettes, it's got a program that tells you when you should be changing your oil. But the synthetic mileage is way longer than that. How do we resolve that and figure out what's the best course to go by now?
What are you currently changing it at for mileage today?
Pardon?
What mileage are you changing it at on your C5 currently?
Well, my car has 100,000 now on it.
How often are you changing the oil?
Generally around 5,000.
Okay. So there's two reasons or changes behind why the oil change interval has gotten longer. One, if you go back to C5, the sump size was 6 quarts, 6.5, I think. I can't remember if they all got the batwing pan that the Z06 has got, or if not all of them. Anyway, but the sump size has gotten larger. If you go far enough back to, say, my 88 Camaro, that had a 4.5 quart sump. And now the C5s were up to like 6-ish. Now the cars with dry sumps are having 8, 10, 12 quart sumps. So your supply of oil has gotten bigger. The engine displacement hasn't, but when you have a larger bulk tank of oil running along in the vehicle, it's going to last a little bit longer. The oil's not getting stressed as hard. The additives are going to last a little bit longer. So that's one reason that they're getting longer. The other is production tolerances, tuning from General Motors. You have a lot less fuel dilution now. Everything's running much closer to stoichiometric with direct injection as well. That I think the engines run just a little bit cleaner, and that's making a difference in keeping the oil longer as well. If you want to keep changing it at 5,000 miles, that's where I do it on my C5 Z06. It's just a good rule of thumb for me, and I figure oil change is cheap enough maintenance that it's kind of a belt and suspenders answer where I'd rather do the maintenance, even if I don't need it, I'll change it a little bit early.
Yeah. The information that you've been giving on recommendations on changing oil, when, fall, before, after. Is there anywhere where there's any literature on that? I'd like to share some of it with my club, and if I had some literature, it might be easier to do that.
The answer is I don't know. Mobil did a tech article with Hagerty Insurance recently that I think if you were to Google Mobil 1 Hagerty, it would probably pop up pretty quick. And that at least had the same call-outs. I don't remember if they had graphics and stuff like this to support it, but that would give you at least a starting point for some of that literature.
So my question is for the C4 and 85, so the L98. Going back to that screen where you were showing all the differences when you test the oil in the oil analysis, when you have a motor that's that age and well over 100,000 miles, what's kind of like an acceptable range when you're looking at those numbers? What do you expect to see because it's older?
Sure. So C4s and L98s in particular are kind of quirky because you had the tune port injection motors up until I guess it was 85 to 87, but then in 87 they got roller cams, and then they continued with the same induction system up until the second generation small blocks came. So the biggest kicker there is not the age of the engine or the induction type, but in 87 when they switched to the roller cams, that was a change in what the oil needed. Yours being in 85, you still got the flat tappet cams, and the difference with that is you've basically got the cam lobe, right? And when it pushes on the lifter on a flat tappet is basically just a hard, flat surface. So you have a lot of sliding friction. It's two metal surfaces that are mostly flat, scraping against one another. In 87, they went to roller lifters, a roller cam basically, and they put a small piece on there that basically the lifter hits that and spins it, but it still pushes the lifter up, and it took a huge amount of that sliding friction out. So when people start talking about ZDDP, zinc dithiodialkyl phosphate, that's an anti-wear molecule that they tended to run a little bit more of in those older engines because ZDDP is great for those heavy sliding friction interactions between metal surfaces. Post 87, you really don't need as much anywhere in the engine oils. So I would probably try to run a higher zinc oil in those older cars. We make two, the Mobil 1 1550 that you can find anywhere, JEG, Summit Racing, Walmart, AutoZone, dealerships. As well as we just introduced Mobil 1 Classic Car, which is a 10W30. And that's a very similar additive pack, very similar anti-wear, zinc, everything to the 1550. It's just going to be closer to what your car came factory fill with back in the day. Instead of being a 50 weight oil at high temps, it'll be a 30 weight. So those two are the main recommendations. When you're doing an oil analysis report, you're still looking for bearings and you're looking for metal health, for iron, for copper, for aluminum. I would look at your salts, your potassium, your sodium, because those will give you some indication. If you start seeing those go up, that's usually indicative of a coolant leak. You may have a head gasket that's starting to go. Silicon as well. On a new engine, you'd think that's RTV material making it into the oil. On an older engine, that can be dirt, dust, other things that are making their way past the throttle body. If you've got vacuum leaks or if you've got other stuff and you're sucking more of just the ambient air and dirt or dust and that stuff into the engine. That's probably what I'd look at.
So I've got a 14 C7, and it started with the 530. Mm-hmm. Then I think the next evolution was the ESP 040. So now supercar would be the next evolution for the C7. And I'm looking at maybe an E-Ray, so it's going to come with supercar.
Yes, and the ESP was kind of a stopgap in between the 530 and 040 that I don't think that's available anymore. ESP became supercar. So now I think the only option is the 040 supercar, and that should apply for the 14 as well as if you're going for the E-Ray.
I'll go back to the C4 again. So the 1993 ZR1 recommends 5W30, but it was a high zinc because it's a double overhead cam engine. I appreciate you have the classic car formula now. That's great, but that's 10W30. So do you recommend stay with the 5W30 and do a zinc additive or some other combination? And I will say I have tracked one of the cars as well and do your 15W50, and that's great on the track, but I don't like that for around town.
Sure, I can understand that. The thing to keep in mind with the 5W versus 10W is when they were designing it originally, the usage window that they protect for an OEM development is insane. You run the cars in Death Valley in August in 130-degree weather, and you run them in northern Minnesota and Canada in January. Even sports cars like the Corvettes, the OEM is doing that testing. That was actually my first job out of college, was doing field testing for an OEM. And so you're trying to protect a temperature window that big, all customers under all conditions. By the time the cars are in our hands, they lead a pretty baby life, right? You're probably not using your LT5 powered C4 Corvette in January in the salt in very cold temperatures. When I say babied, I don't mean it's not that you push it hard. Pushing it hard is not actually that stressful on the oil or the engine. The stressful stuff is the cold temperatures, cold starts, going full red line when the engine doesn't have any temperature in the coolant or the oil. That's much more destructive to an engine than letting the coolant and the oil get hot and then using it how the car was built to be driven. So for that, if you're not doing below zero startups and extended run times, I wouldn't worry about the 530 versus 1030. And between those two oils now, I think the 10W30 classic car is going to be the much better performance oil for like an LT5 powered ZR1.
I got another question in regard to the other replacement when you do an oil change, and that's the filter. Is there any recommendation on the filter change?
Sure. We don't make our filters. I don't think many OEMs do. Everybody contracts them out to like 5 different filter manufacturers, and they build them to your specs. They'll say, okay, what gasket material do you want? What micron size do you want? What drain back valve do you want? And so we spec ours out. But the way that I look at oil filters is there's basically 3 tiers. There's a good enough, there's a better than good enough, and there's a best. And I always want to be in the best tier, and I'm not too worked up about whose name is on it as long as I'm using one from the best. And I can say ours are in that best tier, K&N is in that best tier. There's a few others that are in that best tier. If you Google it and say, hey, oil filter analysis, there's a guy that cuts them apart and looks at the gaskets and looks at the filter media and looks at the paper and everything else like that. And I would just, he sorts them and he gives updates if somebody changes manufacturers and goes, oh, they used to be great, they got bad, or they were bad, they got much better. Just try to use from the top tier and you'll be good to go. Obviously, we like it when you buy our filters, but I'm not here to sell you anything. I'm from engineering, not sales or marketing, so who's got the mic?
I have a vehicle that has 315,000 miles on it. And my question is, should I continue with the same weight of oil or go to a heavier oil, being that it has that much wear?
Which car was it and which oil's in it currently?
This is a Ford truck. It's a 3.5 with the turbo.
Okay.
There's no knocks or noises in it. It's still running good.
And I'm assuming it's been on synthetic since you got it, probably.
Yeah.
I would stick with what you're doing then. Typically, the only time that we would see issues on real high mileage is if you were running a conventional oil and you were maybe pushing the oil changes too far. You might start to see more blow-by. You might start to see more stuff like that. On the ones that we buy that we put hundreds of thousands of miles on, if we've been running synthetic from day one, almost nothing changes. You know, we'll go 600, 700,000 miles without issue.
So stay with the same weight?
Mm-hmm. Do I have any other slides as we're going to the next person? Oh, perfect. We were at Q&A anyway, so awesome.
You were talking about oil filters a minute ago, and you said you have top-tier filters. How about the stock GM filter? Would it be better to run a third-party high-end filter or just stick with the GM filter?
I would have no concerns running a GM filter. I think they're designed to that top spec. You know, you have to check. I'm not familiar with their supplier network, so if they do make a change, they don't call me and tell me, hey, we changed the part number. But their filters are very, very good. And I know, obviously, that's what all the OEM durability was run on. So they've run their cars out past 250,000 miles or more on the GM filters that I would have no concerns.
What's the difference between high mileage and the regular, like a 5W30 Mobil 1, and what mileage is it, like over 100,000 that you go to the high mileage? And I don't know what the difference in the oils is.
Sure. No, it's a good question. If you've been running a synthetic from the very beginning, I probably wouldn't even go to the high mileage. Like this gentleman asked with his Ford truck with the 3.5 EcoBoost in it. Most modern engines, and when I say modern, if it's been built in the past 2 or 3 decades, are going to have good enough gasket technology, they're going to have good enough assembly tolerances and cleanliness standards and everything else that they're going to be pretty good. And if you run synthetic in them from day one, just continue to run the synthetic that you've been using. If you have an older car that maybe didn't run its whole life on synthetic, or if it has older gasket technology, the high mileage used to have a seal swell additive to help keep the gaskets and seals in the engine in better shape. I think we've actually lowered the concentration of that. But then it'll also have a little bit higher concentration of some of the other additives. Detergents to keep the engine clean, and anti-sludge and anti-corrosion. Basically, the expectation is if you bought the car at 100,000 miles with an unknown history, how can we help clean that engine out a little bit? How can we help get it back up to a higher level of either performance or cleanliness or durability with the high mileage oil? So it's an additive package change for those.
Last one, then we got to do the drawing.
Okay, apparently we're out of time. We got to do drawings. We'll hang out up here. If you do have a question we didn't get to, we'll stay for a few minutes.
I'm going to go back a couple of years when Cam was here.
Yep.
And the subject of flat tappet cams came up. And Cam gave us a recommendation to use 5W40 turbo diesel. And I used that for a long time. And as a matter of fact, if you went to the website and looked at the recommendation, turbo diesel came up as a recommendation for flat tappet cam in my 1980 Corvette. So the question, either the 10W30 Classic and or 5W40 turbo diesel, which does have the 5 winter weight there. What would be your recommendation? Either or?
For the moment, I'll say either or. It's a great question. I know a lot of people that have been using the diesel oils. For the moment, I would say either or. And everything that Cam told you back then was true. One of the issues that you're getting into now is diesels tend to run about 10 years, sometimes a little bit more, behind gas engines in terms of oil standards and developments and emission systems. So you got catalytic converters on cars in the 70s and in the 80s. Then diesels came through now, and you've got diesel particulate filters, you've got selective catalyst reduction, you've got all these emission systems that are coming to the diesel engines. And the OEMs are finding that the same things were true back then. The reason we pulled zinc out of oils isn't because it stopped working or because there was something going on with it. It was because ZDDP is a zinc molecule and a phosphorus molecule linked together chemically. You don't get one without the other. And the zinc molecule is great for anywhere. The phosphorus molecule is great for detergency. But the phosphorus molecule poisons catalysts. So your catalytic converter is going to stop working sooner than expected if you go too high on the treat rate for phosphorus and on certain other metals. The diesel manufacturers are seeing the same things, that as they go from, I've been out of the dyno testing side for a while, 5 or 6 years, but I think they're on CJ4 right now and they're going to CK4. It may be K to L, but anyway, they're moving to a new category soon. And the new category is actually limiting the amount of metallic compounds you can put in the oil, just like gas engine oils did in 1997. When we went to the 800 ppm cap on ZDP for gas oils, that was what made that split. It was emission systems protection. Diesel oils are going through the same thing, and the oil standards are changing to the point that moving forward, there's going to be a legacy oil spec for diesel, and there's going to be a new diesel spec. And the new diesel spec is going to be very similar to a modern gas spec. So you don't really get those benefits that you were talking about. So I'd hate to tell you, yeah, keep doing it, and then the oil changes, and those things drop out. For ZDDP for old cars, and again, you have to have that flat tappet, you have to have, if somebody said they have an air-cooled 911, or if they have an old air-cooled Bug, or if they have a 289 Mustang, a C2 or C3 Corvette, there's a range that ZDDP works really well. And this is true for all additives, whether they're detergents, friction modifiers, or anything. But you add a little bit and you get a benefit. You add a little bit and you get a benefit. and you add a little bit more, you get more of a benefit, and then you add too much, and performance just falls off a cliff. So that's true for ZDDP just like anything else. And the optimum range that we've found for the older cars is it kind of starts working at 1,000 to 1,200 ppm, and then much above 2,300 ppm, the performance actually starts to fall off again. So you want to be somewhere in that range. When you do look at our product data sheets on our website, we have a section off to the right that says, what about zinc? It will list the ZDDP concentration for every formulation we do, not just Supercar and 1550, but like the 530 fuel economy oils and all the other stuff like that. The 4 that we have right now that are above 1,200 ppm zinc are Mobil 1 15W50, Mobil 1 Classic Car 1030, and then the 2 Mobil 1 racing oils, the 030 and the 050. So I would pick from one of those 4. Correct. Yep. Yep. So I think we'll end on that one. Just one quick note before we get to do the drawing. I've been doing this job for 5 or 6 years. It's been the best job that I've had. They have announced they're moving me into a different role within the company at the end of this year's race season. So this is probably the last chance I'm going to get to chat with all of you guys. But thank you for coming. Thank you for attending the last Tech Talk. We'll have somebody else new up here doing it next year, but it's really been a pleasure, and thank you again. So.
Yeah, and Cliff and I will hang out in the back. If you had a question and we didn't get to you, we'll catch up with you in the back. Make sure we don't disturb the next one. So,
if you did not get a ticket and you were here for the Mobil presentation, could you please raise your hand? I'll be right there.
all right, the first 2 will draw for a jacket, the Mobil 1 Corvette jacket, and then the last 2 will draw for the hot laps.
First ticket, last 4 is 3874. 3874. Excellent. Congratulations. Second ticket is 3850. 3850. Wonderful.
Okay.
Congrats.
She'll hand you, and so it'll be a card, and you click on a QR, and it'll let you order the size you want versus everybody getting an extra large. So.
Yep, exactly. We used to bring extra large jackets, and we just give you the jacket the day of. We realized not everybody wears the same size, and we want you to wear this stuff and enjoy it. So you just send them an email with the link in the card, and they will mail you whatever size jacket you would like.
All right. Now we'll draw two, right? Yeah, 2 hot laps.
Okay. All righty. Last 4, 3871. 3871, congratulations. And 3869. 3869. So. 3869. Going once, going twice. I see somebody standing up. I'm not sure if that means you have the ticket or if. Sir? Oh, we'll check it, and if not, we'll do a second drawing.
Oh, do we have anybody?
3869, last call. All right, we'll redraw. 3866. 3866. Excellent. Congratulations. Do we have any more drawings, or is that going to do it for us?
I think that is it.
All right. We're at our time commitment. Like I said, we'll hang up front here. And thank you all again. Enjoy the weekend.